thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. At Issue tonight, it's becoming more likely that if and when lawmakers decide to change the state's K-12 public education funding formula, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program, the debate and vote would come in a special session. The House Appropriations Committee passed several state budget bills this week. Committee Chairman John Reed, a Republican from Gaucher, says the money for school districts is being set aside at level funding from last year, more than $2 billion. But he adds MAEP is not included. We spoke with Reed and Democratic Representative Robert Huddleston of Sumner about the potential changes to the school funding formula and the possibility of a special session.
The people that are the architects on this want to make sure they have a good product. Not going to bring anything out that's not a quality product, and for the benefit of all. I mean, there's no heinous. The main thing is you're trying to get all monies. The old formula had monies, salaries was not considered education. Transportation was not considered education. So what we're trying to do is get all money spent to education in one and let you know how much money is actually being spent on education. And we're trying to also take it all the way down to the student and classroom. That's where maybe get out some of the top. No, not all, nothing's 100%, but there are some heavy administrative costs in some areas. In some areas it's lean machine. So we're going to try to make sure that we get the most bang for the dollar at the classroom.
Well, I really don't think you should have a special session. I think we should take care of the business at hand while we're down here. As you all know, we've been out session, I think 2 or 3 Fridays. We could have had time to take care of that business then, but my point is I think we should do what we come down here for, to take care of people's business. Well, if you're going to change the funding, they're going to make sure it benefits the state of Mississippi. I think we need to do that. I mean, when you're changing something, you make sure that you put everything you need to have it in to make sure the thing works for the people in the state of Mississippi.
So do you support the formula or?
Not exactly. I hadn't looked at all the components. I mean, sometimes you put something in and then you turn around and take it out. You got to remember now, once we pass these bills, we're going to have conference. You got 3 referees from the House side, you got 3 from the Senate side. So basically what you're doing, you got 122 members going to vote on an item. 52 senators going to vote on an item. When I say item, I'm to my bill. But once we go in conference, you got 3 referees, 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate. So basically those are going to be the key players in making a decision how much money be taken out, how much money be added in. Once they make those final decisions, I mean, it's there. We got to live with it, whether good or bad.
The House Appropriations Committee also passed a bill that would help fund a new trooper school for the Mississippi Highway Patrol. The bill sets aside $1.7 million for training new hires. The Highway Patrol is currently short-staffed and more than 100 troopers are at retirement age. The bill now goes to the Senate. Over on the Senate side, the Senate Appropriations Committee passed several funding bills for state agencies this week. Republican Senator Buck Clark of Hollandale is the committee chairman. He says they're putting together the $6.1 billion state budget for next year based on 98% of the revenue projection to allow for a bit of a safety net. They're essentially reducing the budget by approximately 2 percentage points. We spoke with Senator Clark about the budget.
What we used today was a legislative budget recommendation that was put out in December. The Legislative Budget Committee that meets every fall and takes the revenue estimate and applies different criteria to different agencies, and usually results in some cuts, like vacant positions. We didn't declare anything a vacancy unless it had been empty for 180 days, half the year. If nobody had been working in that position, we eliminated that. And that was a major part of when you see cuts, that represented that dollar amount. We also, back in the fall, we had some budget working groups that had looked at travel expense, contractual services, and we made some cuts in those areas. We cut 50% of travel in some places. We cut a lot of out-of-state travel. Those are some of the major cuts in those areas that got applied to each budget. We had a car moratorium where anyone trying to buy new cars, we just cut those out of the budget. And so that's a lot of the cuts you see reflected in that legislative budget recommendation. But again, this is something that's been out there for 2.5 months that the public could look at. It was made public, and that's what the Senate position is going forward. And another important point with this is the revenue amount. What a revenue amount do you have to budget from? It's about $6.1 billion, and that's really flat from last year. And another important point is we're only budgeting for 98% of our revenue. Last year we put in there 100%. We thought let's budget 100% and we get some growth and that'll cover it. Well, the governors had to make cuts. Had to make 2 cuts, and that's because of not hitting 100% of that revenue and coming up short. And so we just feel not only if you're maybe putting some money into the rainy day fund, if you hit 100% of your revenue. If you don't hit 100% of your revenue, you've got that 2% cushion, and it keeps the government from having to make cuts in the middle of the year. So it's a safety factor, part of it. The number's what it is. The pie is what it is. It's rearrange the pie if you don't like a number. And some people don't like the numbers, but again, I'd ask them, the ones that vote against it, I don't like this level of funding, well, step up and tell me where to cut it from.
We are now at the halfway point of the session. MPB's Desiree Frazier called up with Governor Phil Bryant to get his thoughts on the work lawmakers have done so far, starting with rewriting the state's public education funding formula.
I want to talk to you about the progress that's being made in the legislature, talking first about the education funding formula being changed. Your take on that?
Sure. I think they're working hard on that. I met with the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor, Appropriations Chairman, Education Chairman. I think you'll see a product before the end of the session, but we're only just halfway through, so we've got plenty of time. If I need to call a special session within a session, I can certainly do that. They have a couple of days that can be used, but what I'd like to see, if we do call a special session, is it to occur during the current while the session is in progress, and take that bill up. But I haven't seen all of the details of it yet, and so we're going to review it very carefully before any decision is made about a special session.
Is it possible that the funding formula for this session could stay the same without changes?
It is, certainly, if there's not an agreement. One of the things that I'm trying to be very careful about is that we have an agreement. If we call a special session only to fight for 3 or 4 days, we've wasted a lot of time. So my recommendation is just a recommendation to make sure we have any changes to the formula in the hands of House members and senators and the general public, so it can be carefully reviewed before a vote is taken on it. And I think that is the goal of the leadership here in the legislature, make sure everyone has the time to review it and there's no surprises.
Your feelings about the Department of Mental Health. Initially, the Senate passed the bill, then it didn't pass to give you power to appoint the executive director.
My concern are a number of things. One, we've got to do a better job with mental health. There are people in this state and families I talk to on a pretty regular basis that are struggling, and we have to serve our mental health population. We are last in a lot of categories when it comes to working with our mental health population and their families, and we've got to, as the court is telling us, we've been sued again, and we've got to move toward a community system within our mental health system, and it seems as if that's something that we're having difficulty getting across, that we need to make that change so that people that are struggling with mental health can be with their families, can be in their communities. Treatment has changed, and so I believe that if it was a cabinet level position and the governor's office, no matter who the governor is, had the authority to help move forward as we do now with the Child Protection Services, we might be able to do a better job, and not critical of anyone, but hopefully do a better job of serving the people that need us most.
The BP oil spill money, Senate passed it. There may be opposition in the House. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it should stay on the Gulf Coast, and I think it's really good just now to put it into a reserve fund so we can carefully look at any plans that may be out there. We can look at also using it and leveraging with other funds that may be available, but primarily that funding needs to go to the Mississippi Gulf Coast where the damage took place because of the oil spill.
Trooper School.
Trooper school. Gotta have
House
one.
passed 1.7 million, but it's level funded on the Senate, and that's something that you have really focused on.
We have to. Lives depend upon it. Men and women and their families that are traveling the road today need to know they have some degree of protection. We are terribly understaffed at the Department of Public Safety and Highway Patrol, so I believe we'll get a trooper school. This will be the second one since I've been governor. Hopefully we need 70 to 75 troopers to come out of that school and put them on the road as quickly as possible.
Your feelings on the state budget? The Treasurer's Office had a budget presentation overview this morning.
It is not where we want it to be. Obviously, revenues could be better. We're one of about 21 or 22 different states where revenues are down. And so we will, if we have to, I'm always interested to see how it's reported. Governor makes cuts. My job as governor under the Constitution and the laws of this state is to help balance that budget. If it appears that we will not have sufficient revenues coming in, I will make sufficient cuts to balance the budget or draw upon the rainy day fund. That's a simple act of the executive branch here, and if we have to do that again, we'll have to do it. I think you're going to see an increase in it with lower regulations into the future. The oil and gas industry, which is a big part of our revenue here, will continue to pick up, and hopefully you'll see some of the public getting a more confidence in the economy and go about buying consumer products. That's where the big challenge is at just now.
A bill passed by the House would give kids power to defend themselves against bullies in school. House Bill 263 requires that schools' anti-bullying policies recognize the fundamental right of students to take reasonable defensive action when attacked by another student who has displayed menacing or threatening behavior through bullying or harassing. The bill's author, Republican Randy Boyd of Manatee, explained the bill while taking questions on the House floor.
It does give an opportunity for the victim to have a reasonable defensive act on his behalf when the bullying is occurring, and him not to be charged with it. Nowadays, if you're at school and bullying happens and someone tries to defend themselves, they say, well, that's a two-party thing, and then they get punished, but all they're trying to do is defend themselves, and oftentimes the victim cannot defend himself against the bully or herself.
I'm pushing you down the hall, pushing you into the lockers, whatever. You can turn around and push me back or hit me, and that won't be viewed as retaliation, but it will be viewed as self-defense.
Well, yes. You know, in a lot of these cases, there's physical harm involved, not just pushing. It could be, you know, just turning around and putting your hands up over your head and pushing back. I mean, it could be something simple, but it's a reasonable amount.
Okay, what about if I am internet bullying you and sending texts and tweets out about you, and I do it all Monday night, and I come to school and continue to do it Tuesday morning? What is my recourse? Your recourse toward me?
Well, I mean, that's not a physical confrontation. So, I mean, the reasonable thing might be I come up to you and say, you better stop. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it would be up to the people who are there to decide. But, you know, we got to be reasonable about some things. I mean, it's not meant for the victim to turn around and then bully the bully.
The bill allows school districts to determine what constitutes a reasonable defensive act. The bill now goes to the Senate for consideration. Well, let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Lucien Smith is filling in for Austin Barber this week. He's a Republican and former chief of staff for Governor Bryant. He's currently with the law firm of Balch and Bingham. Gentlemen, thank you both for being on At Issue. Lucien, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Let's talk first about the budget. There's been a lot of conversation about the budget at the Capitol this week. Brandon, what do you think the likelihood is of a mid-year budget cut?
Well, you just heard the governor talk about where we are, and we also heard reports from the state economist and the state treasurer's office, which didn't sound very glowing. It's very hard to deny where we are as an economy at this moment. Decent chance we'll see another cut probably before I finish this sentence. I think it's almost inevitable, and we could potentially see a fourth one, you know, fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's a very high likelihood of a cut coming fairly soon. You know, one thing to keep in mind we're still collecting more money in fiscal year 17, the current fiscal year, than we collected in 16. We're just not collecting as much money as we thought we would, and so we don't have enough money to pay the actual appropriations that were put out.
And we heard how next year they're budgeting on a 98% under that scenario. But we've heard this a lot this fiscal year, that revenues are down. What's the long-term solution here?
Well, I think one is this 98% rule. I mean, I think the 98% rule is very important, and what the statute requires is that all of the appropriations bills, when you total them up, only add up to 98% of the revenue estimate that the states come up with. We're growing. I mean, we're collecting more money, like I said, more money this year than we did before. The problem is, because we appropriated 100% rather than 98% of the estimate, every dollar below what you estimated requires some sort of a cut. But if you had the 98% rule in place, you've got a larger cushion, so revenue has to be 2% off before you've got to change any of the appropriations. That is an important safety mechanism, and I think it's smart that the legislature is going back to the 98% rule.
You could feel, Lucien, Chairman Reed and Chairman Clark really diving in deep on the mechanics of how you move these things around, because I think that's one of the ways you protect yourself from having to deal with the larger realities of the state economy. I mean, the picture painted by the economists in the Treasurer's office was just very bleak. The gross domestic product is down as compared to 2008 numbers. Our state tax collection is down 1.2%. State income tax is down 0.1%. On top of that, our indebtedness has grown, I think, 41% over the last 10 years. Those are striking numbers. And then we heard on top of that, the economists say that looks like we're losing population. So it kind of reminds me of my dad. We used to watch football together, and he'd say, well, that quarterback can't throw real well, but at least he's not too strong and can't run too fast either. I thought, well, we're in a rough spot.
Mississippi's always been slower to go into recessions and slower to come out of them. It's just the nature of our economy here, but I think we'll rebound. Keep in mind, the Republicans just got control of government 5 years ago, so we've got 100 years of Democratic control we've got to fix so we can have faster growth.
Well, it's keeping the tradition that Austin started of saying, just trust us, give us more time, it's all going to be fine. Give it a little bit longer.
A few more years and we'll see what happens. Let's move on to something that's been on a topic that's been on our agenda every week, it seems, since the session began, and that's education and the Mississippi Adequate Education Program, EdBuild. Does it look likely in your eyes, Lucien, that we will have a special session to take up an EdBuild proposal this year?
I think it's very possible. The bills that would have allowed a vote on the EdBuild proposals died, so you'd have to have a special session in order to bring them back up, unless you could get 2/3 agreement on both sides, which is just never going to happen. But I think politically, you almost have to have a vote on some actual proposals, because there are things in the EdBuild proposal that I haven't spoken with them, but I don't know that the Lieutenant Governor or the Speaker or the Republican leadership generally would be for, the potential increases in property taxes. And so I think if you don't have a vote on an actual proposal, then when we have statewide elections in 19, the Democrats can pull anything out of the EdBuild proposal that people aren't happy with and say, this is what the Republican leadership tried to do to you. So I think we're going to see a bill either in a special session or certainly next year, so that there's an actual Republican position on changes to the MAEP formula.
Well, it's a good point, Lucien. I think you're right. I mean, going into this session, there were supposed to be two really big ticket items. One of them was retooling MAEP. The other one was infrastructure. We have learned over the last several weeks that infrastructure is off the table, so that you're left with MAEP. And so you kind of have to have some big legislative agenda hit that ends up further serving the agenda. And so without that, I think you're right. It'd be kind of strange. But in reflecting on exactly what's going on, it's become more and more clear to me that at least part of what's in play here for folks at home who are watching this is that you want to retool the MAEP formula so that you can declare victory, so that you can declare that education is fully funding, even if funding is no different than it is today or no different than it was last year. Because if I'm a Republican, I'm having good success at winning elections, but one of the flies in the ointment is this revolving fight over education funding. And so a more cynical perspective on why it's politically expedient to do something is to come up with a formula that allows you to say we're fully funding education, even if the overall numbers don't change that much. And so there's a lot riding on this, and of course that's a cynic's view of what is at least a part in play.
Yeah, I mean, I think more what the Republicans are thinking is we need to have a more honest discussion of education funding, because education funding is at all-time highs under Republican leadership. There have been significant increases over the course of the last 5 years. We're spending more now with a Republican speaker on education than we did when we had a Democratic speaker. But a lot of that money isn't going through the MAP formula. You know, the governor championed, and the House and the Senate passed the third grade reading gate several years ago. And so there's been specialized funding to provide for coaches, to provide for the interventionists, but it's not going through the MAP formula. And so even though education has been increased, the formula is not being fully funded. And so this would be a way, like Chairman Reed said, to get more money through the formula directly into the classroom. I mean, I think it's a good, much-needed reform that I'm optimistic that they'll be able to get through.
But are there some political smoke and mirrors, as Brandon described, at work here too?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, education funding keeps going up. I think if there's smoke and mirrors, it's somewhat on the other side. I mean, the problem with the MAP formula is that the way it works will require additional funding every year. It's been fully funded twice, and that's under both Republican and Democratic leadership, because at the end of the day, all they can do is look at what the pie is in the total state budget and decide how much of it goes towards education. But it has been set up in a way that it's a perfect cudgel for Democrats to use every single year against Republicans, because they're always going to be able to say, look, you didn't fully fund education. Well, really, you didn't fully fund the formula, the number that it happened to spit out. So having some reform to make that a little more transparent, to have it focus on classroom education, that'd be a great thing.
You know, a big problem, I guess the elephant in the room with this conversation as it stands right now is, though, we really just have no idea what this program is going to look like. And that's a huge problem for Republicans. I mean, because we can talk about all of these things in the abstract, as we have done on this program for weeks, but until you have something that people can feel and touch and talk about and debate, you're really behind. And we are, you know, as each day ticks away, we're getting closer to the end of that session. And you have to ask yourself, how much time do you need to fully vet a new K through 12 education program? We're getting very close to that moment when I think you're rushing it, which is something I know they wanted to avoid.
No, and that's a very valid point. I mean, and it's conceivable, to your earlier question, that you end up pushing the actual vote on this off to the next session, so you've got a full year to vet what the final proposal is. Because I think it's very easy for there to be fear and fear-mongering about what's in the bill when there's not actually a bill for anyone to read and confirm what is or isn't there.
Yeah.
A bill that failed would have moved the Department of Mental Health under more of the governor's control. It would have allowed the governor to appoint a director to the Department of Mental Health instead of a board serving that purpose. Was that not a significant defeat for the lieutenant governor?
I think it was certainly a surprise over there, because you had Republicans who generally vote with him who didn't vote with him. I'll say this, I don't think the lieutenant governor is not likely to just let that pass. I suspect that that'll be both bad for the people who failed to vote with leadership, but I would expect he's going to find another way, whether it's through asking the governor to put it in a special session call, finding another code section that's open. I doubt that that's the last vote we'll see this session on whether or not we ought to make mental health an executive agency.
If there was a way to move those senators, county board of supervisors under the lieutenant governor's office with a piece of legislation, we might see it come. I mean, Lucien is exactly right. This is not a lieutenant governor who loses bills. He has been an extremely effective worker of the legislative process, and whenever he's really wanted something, he has tended to get it. So I think you're right. We'll probably see another round of this. But with respect to the legislation itself, you know, we talked about it last week. We've seen sort of a return to consolidation, a real interest in trying to bring programs under the governor's office, an interest in trying to change how we can hire and fire state employees. I'm glad that Republicans and Democrats last week kind of said that this was a step too far and perhaps too fast. I thought that was a good thing. I like the independence of these agencies. I like the independence of something as important as mental health. So I'm very pleased with those Republicans and Democrats who kind of stepped outside the box. But you're right, this may not be the last we hear about it.
Well, and as to the substance, I mean, I think there's real value, and I think the governor and the lieutenant governor think there's real value in having agencies that spend taxpayer money, that perform a public function, somehow be responsive to an elected official. I mean, mental health is a totally independent agency. There's a board of directors. It's appointed by a handful of different people who choose the executive director. But if you're aggrieved at what mental health has done to you or to some relative, there's no elected official you can go to who's able to really affect it. I mean, the legislature can cut their funding, they can play with legislation, but there's no one who can actually call the director and say, you've got to do this differently. And that's anti-democratic, and I think it makes people uncomfortable that we don't have a little bit more responsiveness in those agencies.
This started as a discussion about civil service protection and removing civil service protection from many state employees, the argument being it would be easier to hire and fire and perhaps streamline some agencies. Is that argument effectively dead for this session as a result of this defeat?
I don't see it coming back, but it's certainly possible that somebody could find a vehicle to get it. I mean, it is when you're having budget difficulties like this, it is a wonderful tool to not have to go through the standard state service protection process to right-size agencies, which is what you're going to have to do if we keep seeing these size of cuts.
Yeah, I think there still is a House product, but this is a strong signal by the Senate. It's very hard to see them going with the House proposal, which was much more far-reaching than their modest proposal ultimately was. So I think, in all likelihood, it's not going to be nearly what was predicted as late as even 6-7 days ago. So I do think to some extent that vote in the Senate was important because it probably says that if you're going to get something, this is probably about as good as you're going to be able to get the votes for.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to, this is the phase in the session where we move over to really focusing on the budget. And I think, you talk about what this session is going to be about. I think the session's ultimately going to be about the state budget and how we make it work.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty tough time. They are over there trying to tool it together with duct tape, and it's going to be a tough couple weeks.
Brandon, Lucien, thank you both. And thank you for joining us on At Issue. We are out of time for tonight. Don't forget, you can check out the show on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. Please join us again next Friday here on MPB for another edition of At Issue.